Welcome to Call Her Daring, and thank you for joining me and women from all walks of life. This episode is brought to you by Bagnet Company. Since the publishing of Megan Agnew's pieces in the Times, I have been asked via TikTok comments and messages for my thoughts on Tradwives and more specifically Hannah Nealman and Ballerina Farm. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I want to focus on three main points. The first is that Tradwives are performers running a business. The second is that the role of fundamentalist Christianity must be examined in any conversation about Tradwives. And the third is feminism is not Hannah Nealman's choice to be a Tradwife. Let's get into it. The Tradwife lifestyle, as portrayed on social media, is not a lifestyle. It is a performance, and it is a business. In fact, the Tradwife lifestyle is such a performance for profit that we shouldn't even refer to it as a lifestyle. We should call it Tradwife performance or Tradwife business. Everything that I'm going to talk about on this topic needs to be viewed through this lens. If we don't recognize and acknowledge that Tradwife content exists for financial profit and religious benefit, then it's pointless to even entertain a discussion about this topic. So much of the way motherhood is represented on social media is performative, but the people performing and the people viewing pretend that it's not a performance. And that's true for non-Tradwife content too. The difference with Tradwife content and the reason that it's so dangerous for women, especially young women, are the ulterior motives lurking behind it, and the fact that young people are especially susceptible to covert messaging in social media. They often don't have the ability to critically engage with social media content to understand and analyze the messages that are being communicated. I mean, shit, there are grown adults that don't have the ability to do that. If you take the rolling back of women's rights and the constant push of MAGA and conservative Christian values, and mix that with millions of young people watching these performances and romanticizing these women's lives, all while lacking the ability to critically evaluate the messaging, you have a recipe for disaster. And by disaster, I mean a segment of the female population falling into a subservient, powerless, voiceless lifestyle without fully informed consent. Adjacent to the central role of religion in these Tradwife businesses is financial profit. Even if you choose to disregard the religious underpinnings of these accounts, it is impossible to feign ignorance to the fact that these women are working to create content that brings a significant amount of income to their households. This fact alone should be all anyone needs to know to delegitimize social media Tradwives and recognize them as a business, not a bona fide lifestyle. A traditional wife, by definition, believes in and practices traditional gender roles in marriage. And those roles include women not working for money. Those roles include men being the primary, if not sole, breadwinners. These popular Tradwives have creative and management teams working their social media accounts. They are bona fide businesses that are selling you a fictional lifestyle and making millions doing it. I'm all for women getting their bag, but let's call a spade a spade. There's nothing traditional housewife about this work. At the center of Tradwife performance is religion, and it's even more central than financial profit. In the case of two of the most popular Tradwives, Nara Smith and Hannah Nealman, that central religion is Mormonism. The core purpose behind Tradwife performance is to serve as propaganda for the recruitment of new followers and converts to conservative Christian religions, Mormonism being one of them. Although they may not overtly demonstrate their religious beliefs, it does not take much critical thought to realize that the glorified traditional gender roles, the spousal subservience, and the idealized homemaking are pulled from their patriarchal religious values. If there has been any doubt in your mind about the central influence of conservative Christian values in Tradwife content, then those doubts should be assuaged by Megan Agnew's piece on Ballerina Farm in the Sunday Times. All criticisms on that article aside, Hannah and her husband speak openly about their devout Mormon lifestyle. And she is quoted as saying, "I feel like we're doing what God wants. We are on his errand a little bit," her husband adds, and she echoes that sentiment. "We're on his errand a little bit." A woman named Tia Levings, who is an ex-fundamentalist, has said that Tradwife videos are part of an effort to tacitly recruit people to the influencer's religion by making it seem attractive via their lifestyle. In her Substack, she writes, quote, "The Tradwives take ordinary cultural elements and desires, such as motherhood and staying home to raise one's children, and fetishize it, elevating it to a heavenly calling that renders anyone outside of their homey, warm glow as less than at best, bound for hell at worst." Tia goes on to say in her Substack that underneath the cloyingly sweet aesthetic exists what's known as the umbrella of authority. Men on top, women without a voice unless it's in compliance with the system, and the darkest shadow of them all, which is women teaching the women to perpetuate and perpetrate, because the only power they have is to find validation and expression through others buying into their program. She says it sounds like an MLM pyramid scheme because it is one. And I want to add that Mormons believe that every member should act as a missionary in their area of influence. For women, that area of influence is motherhood and homemaking. So sharing a spit-shined version of their lives with the public is their religious duty. And Hannah Nealman is really, really good at the performance and fulfilling her religious duty. Every bit of content we get from Ballerina Farm, you should ask yourself, what is she selling and who is benefiting from her labor? Her husband is certainly benefiting from her labor. The Mormon Church is benefiting from her labor via recruited converts and the 10% income tithe that the Nealmans undoubtedly pay. And when you watch Ballerina Farm content or buy their products, the Mormon Church benefits from your participation in the whole performance. I think one of the most important questions being asked in this conversation is how responsible are these women for misrepresenting their lifestyles? Should we hold them accountable for selling to millions of women an aspirational lifestyle that at best doesn't exist and at worst is coerced and controlled in an abusive environment? Let's say young women make life-changing decisions based on the Tradwife content they're seeing on social media, only to find out that they've been locked into a way of life that is very challenging to escape. Whether it be due to financial dependence on her husband, domestic abuse, inability to adequately care for her children as a single mom, or punishment from religious community. Are religious Tradwives culpable for playing a part in the oppression of those women? Can we hold them to standards of critical thinking and free will, knowing that they have been indoctrinated and controlled and told what to think for, in some cases, their entire lives? Hannah Nealman has never been in control of her own life, and she has not had much opportunity to exert free will. Additionally, she does not have the same level of consciousness that women growing up in secular environments have had the opportunity to develop. So, if we're going to look at accountability and culpability of Tradwives, then we also need to examine two things: free will and choice, and the systems in which religious Tradwives exist. Because it's these systems that really deserve our attention. All women, at least in the US, are existing and operating within systems of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. The level of privilege, opportunity, free will, and choice we each have within those systems is heavily dependent on the color of our skin, gender affirmation and adherence to gender roles and norms, sexual preference, able-bodiedness, and financial class and security. We know from intersectionality that we have to recognize that where we are positioned in the intersection of these identities determines a lot of our so-called free will and choice. we don't all have the same opportunity and privilege to make choices that will determine the direction and quality of our lives. On top of those systems within which we all exist, religious tradwives like Hannah Nealman also exist and operate within the system of Christian fundamentalism. Hannah Nealman was raised Mormon and taught their set of religious beliefs while being actively discouraged from questioning those beliefs. From the time she was born, she was indoctrinated to be a mother and a wife in servitude to her husband, and she was denied the choice to question God's ordained plan for her life. When we look at Hannah Nealman outside the lens of her religion, what we see is a woman at the top of the food chain. She perfectly embodies our cultural beauty standards to a T. She performs beauty. She has white skin and flawlessly adheres to traditional female gender roles. She is a straight, able-bodied mother who is married to a white, wealthy man. She checks all the boxes. But when we redirect our gaze to see Hannah through that additional system of Christian fundamentalism, we have no choice but to acknowledge that she does not and has never had access to the same choices that women who exist outside of that system have had. And to be crystal clear, the choices available to those women are on many levels an illusion. Mickey Kendall, who is the author of Hood Feminism, talks in a TikTok about the illusion of choice, and if someone can't say no, then they really can't say yes. In her book, Regretting Motherhood, Orna Nath writes, quote, "It seems that as long as women make decisions according to the will of society and the priorities and roles it assigns us, we gain social status as free, independent, autonomous individuals with an untethered ability to fulfill our desires. However, when our choices clash with society's expectations, not only are we condemned for our actions, we are also left on our own to face the implications that accompany a loss of social status." End quote. So many of the comments that I have seen on Ballerina Farm posts since the Times article focus on feminism and choice. There are countless women proclaiming that everyone's a feminist until a woman chooses a life that doesn't fit their narrative. So many comments like that. And these comments make it obvious that feminists have collectively failed to explain and understand what feminism is. Feminism is not about blanket acceptance and support of every woman and her individual choices. Feminism is about engagement with systems of white supremacy, conservative Christianity, patriarchy, and privilege, and how those systems control the choices of all women. If you're defending one woman's choice to have 8 kids and live on a farm and calling that feminism, you're missing the point. The systems within which she exists decided the choices available to her, so she didn't really choose at all. Feminism is less about defending Hannah Nealman's choices and more about recognizing the varying degree systems of oppression control all of our choices. What I hope the Times article and subsequent rhetoric has shown is that the Tradwife phenomenon is a complex and multifaceted issue that extends beyond the veneer of the idyllic domesticity showcased on social media. It's imperative to understand that what is often portrayed as a traditional lifestyle is, in reality, a crafted performance aimed at financial gain and religious propagation. This Tradwife content, underpinned by fundamentalist Christian values, serves not only as a profitable business model, but also as a subtle tool for religious recruitment. The performative nature of this content, coupled with the lack of critical engagement from its audience, poses a significant risk of reinforcing regressive gender norms and perpetuating systems of oppression. As feminists, it is crucial to dissect and challenge these narratives, recognizing that the concept of choice is deeply entangled with societal and religious expectations. True feminism demands an examination of the systems that shape and limit women's choices, advocating for genuine autonomy and informed decision-making from the coercive influences of patriarchal and religious structures. Only by acknowledging and addressing these underlying issues can we hope to empower all women, irrespective of their backgrounds, to make truly free and informed choices about their lives. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Call Her Daring podcast. You can find me and Call Her Daring on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Follow for even more content and conversations about women being radically honest about the female experience. Please join me here every week for a new episode of Call Her Daring, and let's continue the powerful tradition of storytelling with the goal of informing and educating us all, so that we may step into our truest selves and realize our full potential as powerful women.